Hello again, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you wanting to spend some time with us. Today we're covering the 12 most influential hot rods and customs, or at least in my opinion. I'm now 60 years old and have been a hardcore car enthusiast since I was about 8. Like most of you, I built model kits, played with Hot Wheels, Matchbox, and dinky cars, and whenever a custom indoor car show was held during the winter months in the Denver area, my late father would always take me. Now, let me tell you that he was the exact opposite of a car guy, but he took me anyway. Thanks, Pop, for all the memories. So, I know what I like and why. Sure, sometimes a car just grabs you for no particular reason, but I can usually explain what it is about a particular car that makes my heart skip a beat. This list, once compiled, are the cars I immediately thought of. Since I like all kinds of cars, as you guys all do, I'm sure narrowing it down in this category seemed to be the most fun. These cars were all built by people that wanted to express themselves through the art of the automobile. Most importantly, they've become legends that have inspired legions of other builders that use many of the same techniques. Each of us would undoubtedly compile a different list than the dozen cars I selected. Yes, I could list a few more, but I've actually seen most of these cars up close and personal at some point. So I know they aren't just pretty in pictures examples. More information is readily available online if you're interested in learning more about any or all of these cars. So, which of my choices do you agree with, and which ones did I miss? Let me know in the comments. In no particular order, let's get started. The classic Ford Model T pickup T-Bucket. Before World War II began, hot rodders began taking the commonly found Ford flathead V8 engines and transplanting them in cheap, older models that were readily available for someone on a budget. Of course, the Model T had seen over 15 million examples built between 1909 and 1927, so they were everywhere. The Roadsters were the most popular, and Roadster pickups were also sold in great numbers. Once the donor car was stripped down, placed on a frame, and then repowered, the bed looked too long to the eye. It was shortened to a more aesthetically pleasing appearance, and this is the essence of a T-Bucket. They became so popular that by the mid-60s, bodies were being reproduced in fiberglass, along with most of the parts needed to build a traditional-looking car. They were a great entry-level hot rod for most anyone because they were affordable, easy to build, and parts to complete them were everywhere. Over the years, people got really extravagant, using supercharged engines, independent Jaguar-based rear axles, tons of chrome, steamroller rear tires, just to name a few things. Yes, they had their heyday and weren't seen much for 3 decades on, but are now making a bit of a resurgence. I can only imagine what a wild ride a T-Bucket with a blown big block would be. The California Kid. The California Kid was the name of a 1974 made-for-TV movie about a rebellious young man played by Martin Sheen. The car, a creation of a Southern California hot rod builder named Pete Chaporis, was first seen in the early 70s and was already famous to the locals in the SoCal hot rod scene. When the producers of the movie first saw the car on the cover of Rod and Custom magazine, November of '73, they knew it would be perfect for the main character of the movie, Michael McCord, played by Sheen. The car would actually become one of the other characters. Originally, Chaporis had equipped the chopped 3-window 1934 Ford Coupe with a mild Ford 302 engine and an FMX automatic, real Hallebrand custom wheels, and a chrome rear Nerf bar that replaced the original bumper. For the movie, the car received lettering on each door that read The California Kid. The wheels were changed to red Steelies, fake side pipes were added, and a heavy black C-channel rear bumper was fabricated to replace the chrome Nerf bar bumper that was hand fabricated by Shaporis. Because the engine was basically a stock Ford small block, overdubbed engine sounds were provided by a big block 4-speed Corvette. In the movie, the producers wanted the viewer to think the car was heavily modified and had a manual transmission. Inside, the car had not been finished, and clever camera angles never revealed this. But when Sheen shuts the door on the car several times, it's obvious the interior was not finished. Close-ups of the engine was actually footage of the 32 Ford Hot Rod from American Graffiti, because it more convincingly portrayed a proper hot rod power plant. The car received minor damage during filming, and when Shaporis got it back, he returned everything to the way he had it, but he opted to keep the door lettering. Shaporis and a new business partner, Pete Jacobs, would go on to found Pete and Jake's Hot Rod Shop soon after. The Rod and Custom Dream Truck. After the founding of Hot Rod Magazine, as well as several other automotive content-related publications in the late 1940s and early 50s, America's obsession with the automobile was here to stay. Post-war interest in custom and performance vehicles was driven in large part by the men who had recently returned from service in the armed forces, where they learned skills that would be essential in building and modifying their own cars, and in some cases, making a business of it by doing it for their customers. Enter Spence Murray, the first editor of the now iconic publication called Rod and Custom in 1953. Within a short time period, Murray's influence on the world of custom cars was immense. What would become a common occurrence in the decades to follow, he was the first to implement a magazine project car to showcase technical articles of various kinds. Because money at the new magazine was tight, Murray donated his 1950 Chevy truck to the cause. Soon, a local and well-known hot rodder named Lynn Wineland would draw and submit the original design for the truck. Nearly every custom metal trick would be used to complete this build. With Murray's substantial influence, Chevrolet donated one of their newest V8 engines to the magazine in 1954, months before this new overhead valve design, displacing 265 cubic inches, would debut under the hoods of various 1955 models. Of course, in the ensuing decades, it would become one of the most popular engines in automotive history and be simply known as the small block Chevy. Now it seemed that many of the best talents in this burgeoning auto customization industry wanted in on this project. First to sign on was Sam Gates of Gates Auto Body in Pasadena, California. Next, Neil Emery and Clay Jensen of Valley Custom in Burbank added their contributions to the truck. Not too far away, another prominent custom shop run by Curly Davis continued to refine the work of the previous two shops. Next up, Murray transported this custom truck to the now legendary Gene Winfield to perform his magic on the front wheel openings in the hood. The next stop was Barris Customs, where the crew added quad headlamps, scoops for the hood and roof, and modified the front and rear grille openings, and the grills themselves. All of these modifications, performed by some of the best shops in California, helped to seal the mystique of this amazing truck. By now, Rod & Custom had gotten tons of story content for its readers, with this truck getting more and more attention. For the next phase of the build, Murray sent the truck all the way to Bob Metz in Indiana, where the truck's signature feature, those slanted and soaring rear quarter fins, were crafted. After Metz finished his work, the truck was returned to the Barris brothers, where some of the paintwork was reimagined. Throughout its history, the Dream Truck has sported several different colors and graphics. By 1958, the Dream Truck was traveling the nationwide show circuit, drawing thousands of spectators to see this incredible custom. But the story doesn't end here. Oh no, not by a long shot. While Murray is flat-towing the truck back to California from a show in Des Moines, Iowa, the tow vehicle, a 1958 Chevy pickup, blew a rear tire, causing both trucks to jackknife and roll. Both were damaged extensively, but miraculously, Murray escaped serious injury. The cost to rebuild was too much, so it was parted out. For nearly 20 years, most of the parts were in Stockton, California. Custom car enthusiast Bruce Glasscock tracked it down and commissioned the truck's complete restoration, using some of today's best craftsmen. The restoration was nothing short of miraculous, considering what had happened in Iowa. The Dream Truck was so popular, Danbury Mint issued a 1/25th scale replica of it some time ago. It is still occasionally shown at various venues across the country. The Jade Idol. The Jade Idol started life as a 1956 Mercury two-door hardtop that California customizer Gene Winfield, proprietor of Winfield's Custom Shop in Modesto, California, created for his client Leroy Kammerer in 1958. Kammerer had purchased the car new just 2 years earlier, and it served as his daily driver until he decided to have Winfield restyle it. It would be the car that most helped Winfield gain national recognition as a legitimate custom car builder. Winfield was told that a strict budget of $15,000 had to be adhered to, which in today's dollars was an extraordinary amount of money. In fact, close to $160,000. Most assuredly, Winfield could create something totally amazing for that much money. The only stipulation Winfield had was that he wanted to take the car on the show circuit for 1 full year after its completion, so he could show the world his talent and ability to customize a car. Kammerer agreed, and work began in late '58. Dramatic styling cue was sectioning 4 inches from the main body. This is the first sectioned custom that Winfield ever did. The list of additional modifications could fill a book. Inside, the stock dashboard assembly was removed and a padded unit installed, while a TV set was integrated into the dashboard. The instruments were creatively located into the steering wheel hub. This was accomplished by using a steering column from a Teletouch-equipped 1958 Edsel. Cocktail lounge-style chairs were mounted on a swivel, and upholstery was done in pleated white naugahyde and green velvet. Of course, with all these incredible modifications, Winfield stated, and rather correctly, that the stock engine had to also be modified for both increased performance and appearance. The transmission was a floor-mounted shifter model plucked from a late-model Thunderbird. Undoubtedly, the most impressive single feature of the Jade Idol is the incredible paint job applied by Winfield in 1959. Now known as the Winfield Fade, he would apply this technique to many of his full custom paint jobs. Ultimately, the build would take a year and exceed Kammerer's budget by $1,500, which was covered by the builder in order to complete the car. As originally intended, the fresh custom was now going on the show circuit, first in Southern California and then nationwide. Soon, however, tragedy struck as the Jade Idol was being transported home from a show in Missouri when the hauler carrying it flipped over. No one was seriously injured, but the car sustained extensive damage. The car was taken back to Winfield's shop where it was completely stripped down, rebuilt, and repainted. The restored version was completed without the chrome strips on the roof. After the car was fixed, another deal was struck, and the Jade Idol went out on the show circuit again. In the interim, the car changed hands several times, was rebuilt and altered as each owner saw fit, and the car is now fully restored to its original form and in the hands of a serious collector. This car is significant for a number of reasons, and we're happy to report it's still with us and in very capable hands. The Graffiti Coupe. This fenderless 1932 Ford chopped 5-window coupe was prominently featured in the George Lucas coming-of-age motion picture called American Graffiti that debuted in 1973. This car belonged to a local hot rodder named John Milner, and it was, in a sense, also one of the movie's stars. When I first saw it, I wanted this car, or at least one like it, in the worst way. I had to settle for building the model kit and seeing the movie over and over again. Many replicas have been assembled over the past 50 years, and countless other Deuce coupes copied the look and feel of this iconic yellow highboy. A classic. The Hirohata 1951 Mercury Club Coupe. Whenever I conjure up an image in my mind of what the ultimate 1949 to 51 Mercury Coupe should look like and actually be, the Hirohata Merc always comes to mind first. It's absolutely perfect in every way. The perfect chop, the use of what are now traditional Mercury customizing cues such as the wide whites, the Cadillac sombrero caps, the 52 Buick side trim, the Appleton spotlights, and so much more. If you listed each modification on paper, it'd all seem too much. But when you see the car and how each mod was stunningly executed by the Barris brothers and their assistant, Frank Sonzogny, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the expertise of these men is very apparent. Anyhow, these three customizers were given carte blanche to do whatever they felt they needed by the car's owner, Bob Hirohata, who had earlier purchased a brand new 51 Mercury Coupe. The decision was made to leave the mechanicals just as they came from Ford. No need to replace anything here, because after all, it was essentially a brand new car under the skin. Hirohata was an insurance broker in the LA area, so it had seemed that money was not an issue. He just wanted something that would blow everybody away, including himself, whenever and wherever the car was driven. I think the most dramatic part of the Merc's stock to custom transformation was the tasteful use of 2 shades of green, nearly 30 coats worth. In anticipation of the upcoming 1953 Motorama car show, he wanted to enter the car, but the Barrises kept putting it off for nearly 3 months, angering Hirohata when he threatened the customizers with pulling his car from their shop and having it finished somewhere else. Within about 2 weeks' time, with 10 men working furiously on it days, nights, and weekends, the car was completed and shown at the Motorama. Even though Hirohata had essentially given the Barris brothers an unlimited budget, when presented with the final bill, Hirohata had to sell nearly all of his possessions and put his aunt in hock. But he says it was totally worth it. Despite these financial hiccups, Hirohata did transplant a new Cadillac overhead valve V8 in the car as soon as the Motorama was over. It's believed the man himself coined the phrase Mercalac for a Mercury with caddy power. The car received huge praise from show judges and fans alike, which prompted many rod magazines of the day to feature it on their covers and inside too. Soon, millions of people were familiar with this beautiful custom, and many Mercs were built emulating all of the modifications. The car even appeared in a movie, Running Wild, where it was repainted a bright gold color. Soon after, owner and car parted ways. After the car was sold, it then traded hands a few more times until a complete restoration was commissioned in the early 2000s. Even though the original owner hasn't had his name on the title for nearly 6 decades, it still, and always will be, called the Hirohata Merc. It currently resides in the Galpin Ford collection. It's still one of the most recognized customs ever built. Alak Cart. This full custom 1929 Ford Roadster pickup was a collaboration between the iconic customizer George Barris and 2 others. It started as a vision that George drew while out to dinner one night in the mid-50s. He doodled the car's basic shape on a napkin and looked through the menu, spying the words Alak Cart. Barris turned the C into a K, and the name stuck. Powered by a Dodge Red Ram Hemi, sending the power into a modified 39 Ford manual transmission, really impressed showgoers when they saw the added Hillborn fuel injectors and the massive amounts of chrome and details throughout the build. It was, and still is, a beautiful redesign that has stood the test of time. It's simply beautiful, and everything about it is executed perfectly. First completed in late 1957, It escaped a shop fire at Barris's, where many other cars were totally destroyed because it was stored in another building. The car went on to the show of shows for custom roadsters of the time, the Oakland Roadster Show, held in the Bay Area at this time. The Alak Cart won top honors in '58 and came back in '59 to repeat the feat again. This prestigious award is known as America's Most Beautiful Roadster, which indeed it was. In Between, Hot Rod magazine featured it in the October 1958 issue. The Alak Cart's fame was at an all-time high when model car company AMT purchased it in 1961 and immediately issued a 1/25th scale kit that was one of their best sellers of all time. The car fell into disrepair and bounced around to several owners before John Mumford acquired it at the turn of this century. Realizing the significance of this legendary hot rod custom pickup prompted him to contact hot rodding legend Roy Brizio to perform a complete and detailed restoration. Completed in 2008, it was again shown at the Roadster Show, now located in Pomona, California. Greeted by throngs of appreciative fans, the Alak Cart lives on to show people who don't remember how customs were built back in the day without the assistance of CAD, prefab parts, and other conveniences that today's hot rodders just take for granted. Since the restoration was completed, both the Danbury Mint and Mattel's Hot Wheels division have rendered facsimiles of this legendary custom. It occasionally travels the show circuit and is really something to see. If you can see it in your area, don't miss it. The Doane Spencer 1932 Ford Roadster. Almost since hot rodders have been modifying cars for better performance, the 32 Ford, particularly the Roadster model, has been the most coveted of nearly every other car. After the war, used cars were cheap. After all, most people wanted a new car, and Detroit had a plethora of attractive new models to choose from. Because Fords were more prevalent than any other make at the time, older raw material for a hot rod build was literally everywhere. With the founding of the Southern California Timing Association in late 1937 and Hot Rod magazine in 1948, interest in modifying cars and racing cars after the war was at an all-time high, particularly in the Southern California area. Many cars were raced in the dry lakes beds of the LA area, and the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah were only a short drive away. One of those SoCal rodders was a kid named Jack Dorn, who owned a really nice Deuce Roadster that was all set up for speed, with the 1937 Flathead V8 running all the latest hop-up goodies. At this time, it was a full-fendered car. This was a very typical build for the time and area in which he resided. Dorn bought the car in 1941, just before the war. His good friend, Doane Spencer, was an aspiring young hot rodder himself, and he and Dorn were the same age, with the same interests, so a close friendship soon began. In 1944, Spencer convinced Dorn to sell him the car. A deal was struck, and for only $500, the car changed ownership. By now, the car sported what is arguably its trademark feature, the Duval windshield. Earlier, Spencer had it on his A-Bone Roadster when it was wrecked. Before sending it off to the scrap heap, the windshield was removed and then given to Dorn for his Roadster. Once Spencer had secured the title of the car, he evaluated what had been done to this point and what he still needed to do. The grill shill had already been filled and the deck lid was smoothed. Because Spencer was destined to be a racer, he quickly determined the 37 Flatty just wasn't fast enough, so it was replaced with a bigger displacement 258 cubic inch Mercury engine sporting twin carburetors. Now the goal was to race the car at El Mirage. The fenders, running boards, and bumpers were all removed. Before Spencer ran his rebuilt Roadster at El Mirage, it was entered into two shows: the annual Pasadena Roadster Club Reliability Run in 1947, where the car earned the title of Best Appearing Hot Rod, and then it was shown at the first Hot Rod Expo in 1948. Just a few short years later, Spencer acquired a nearly new 55 Thunderbird, which he extensively modified for racing. This new car took up most of his time, and he soon lost interest in the Roadster. The Deuce soon found a new home with Rod and Custom editor Lynn Wineland. The new owner replaced the Merc Flatty with a built Ford Y-block and added a 37 tube axle. Wineland's ownership, though, was brief. He sold it to Neil East, a fellow Rod and Custom staffer who returned the Roadster back to its original state. East had the car for nearly 30 years, driving it and showing it at countless events. By 1995, East decided it was time to sell, and car collector extraordinaire Bruce Meyer bought it and commissioned the Peach and Porras Group to do a proper restoration on this now iconic Deuce. The restoration was done with incredible craftsmanship and attention to bringing it back to the time Spencer had it. In August of 1997, the Doane Spencer Roadster captured the Classic R Historic Hot Rods category at the Pebble Beach Concourse d'Elegance, the first year hot rods were allowed to grace the manicured lawns of Monterey. It also took top honors at Amelia Island, the Meadowbrook Hall, and Louis Vuitton concourse events. Finally, iconic hot rods and customs had garnered the recognition they deserve as a true American art form, just like jazz is recognized by musicians worldwide. The car now resides at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, and since the 32 Ford wowed the public 92 years ago, thousands have been built in original steel or reproduction fiberglass and steel as well. But the Doane Spencer Roadster is among the all-time greats. Perfect in every way and from every angle. Looking at it in great detail at the museum just last year, I can say it lives up to all perceived expectations. The Rick Dobbertin 1965 Chevy 2. In 1982, I had just graduated high school, so my best friend and I, both hardcore gearheads I might add, ventured on a road trip to take in the Carcraft Street Machine Nationals in Illinois. When we got to the fairgrounds, we were not disappointed. Cars from all over the country were present, and all the latest build styles were on display. We recognized many of the cars from magazine feature articles, and in those days, there were many monthly periodicals to read, especially if cleverly hidden in your textbook in class. One car that seemed to be everywhere at the time was Rick Dobbertin's 1965 Chevy 2. This Nova was nearly completely built by the owner, who happened to own a speed shop. This gorgeous blue Chevy compact had a stroked big block, was blown, and had dual turbos along with nitrous oxide. Inside, a full roll cage and an upholstered interior sans back seat and an instrument panel that housed more gauges than an airplane was where the action all took place. In the trunk, the car had received some serious tubs, which was evident when looking at the car's exterior. Yeah, this was no sleeper. It was all business, and at the time was one of the most detailed and well-executed builds ever seen. If you were alive in 1982 and into hot cars, Dobbertin's name and this car were everywhere. While it's unconfirmed as to whether this is the first pro street car ever built, it's certainly one that perhaps started the trend back then. Before this Nova, hardly any builder assembled a car with this level of detail. Yeah, old Rick had skills aplenty. Remember, back in the early 80s, the aftermarket speed industry only included the same stuff that speed shops had been peddling for decades. No custom chassis, narrowed rear axles, roll bar kits, or anything else could be ordered. Everything had to be thoughtfully engineered and then hand fabricated. By 1986, Dobbertin had built a 1985 Pontiac J2000 Pro Streeter, which was engineered and built with the same incredible engineering and detailing. But the J2000 was a more streetable car, leading to today's pro touring cars. To this day, even while researching this video, when I again saw this incredible Chevy 2, took me back 4 decades, I still have mad respect for this car and its creator. The Bob McGee 1932 Ford Roadster. Since Hot Rod Magazine was founded in 1948, of the thousands of cars that have been featured on the covers and in every issue, we'd venture to say that very few have made the impact that this car did when it appeared as the first street-driven car on the magazine's 10th cover in October of 1948, and since then. Originally built by the car's namesake, Bob McGee, in the late 40s, he enjoyed the car for a few short years. McGee sold the car to its next owner, Dick Scritchfield. Automotive historians refer to this iconic highboy as either the McGee Roadster or the McGee Scritchfield Roadster. Throughout its history, die-cast models were issued, and in 2014, the U.S. Postal Service put its image on a stamp. Powered by a 1934 Ford Flathead V8 that had been ported and relieved, and running a Bertrand mechanical camshaft, plus a Burns intake manifold, this Flatty is now punched and stroked to sport 237 cubic inches. Putting the power to the ground is a Lincoln Zephyr-geared 39 Ford transmission and rear axle. This sweet little hot rod really scoots. The original Henry Ford Roadster body sits atop an original deuce frame with a Model A crossmember. When first built, the McGee Roadster employed many of what are now mandatory styling cues for highboys that are still widely seen today. As iconic as this car is, you can find a lot more information about it online. Scritchfield bought the car from McGee in 1956 and was instrumental in launching its Hollywood career, where it appeared in several movies and TV shows. It was stored for a long time. The years were not kind to it. In 1999, automotive collector Bruce Meyer purchased the car. Immediately realizing its historical significance, Meyer had the car completely restored to its hot rod cover car configuration. Just last year, Meyer generously donated the car to the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles, where it's now on permanent display. Thanks to Bruce Meyer for preserving this incredible highboy roadster for future generations to see. It does get driven to local shows, and just last year, we attended the Benedict's Castle show in Riverside, California, when we saw it on the road on its way to the show. In our opinion, everything about this car is absolute perfection. What do you guys think about it? The Little John Buttera 1926 Ford Model T two-door sedan. Starting in the mid-60s, when funny cars became popular, a unique skill set was needed to build these innovative cars properly. Not many people had those skills, but in Southern California, a young man named John Buttera was up to the task. He built and rebuilt many of these drag strip rockets, but in his leisure time, he also built hot rods. Never for clients, but only for himself. Buttera had the skills and the know-how to build a street rod completely different than what was being built at the time. This was in 1974, a time when the street rod industry was just gaining steam. Reproduction parts were scarce, but raw materials, both old and late model, were readily available. He located a solid, rust-free 1926 Ford Model T two-door sedan, and soon began its transformation. The car would be completed in record time, but this was no ordinary street rod. Oh no, sir. Buttera's car would be done in the yet unnamed Resto Mod style, where the car retains all of its original trim and charm, but precisely refinished and gap body panels and an original appearing interior would put the car in a class by itself, since most street rods at the time were obviously modified, and the builds were not always the safest or most reliable cars to drive. In addition, this T would also sport fully polished and detailed four-wheel independent suspension and disc brakes, and have all the creature comforts like AC, heat, defrost, and all the power accessories. Many of the parts needed were not available, so Buttera had to make them from scratch. Under the hood, a built Ford small block displacing 289 cubic inches sent the power to a modified C4 automatic. This car was driven to many national events in the ensuing years to prove its reliability and roadworthiness. A popular model kit was issued for it and has been reissued many times, proving the car is still relevant today. 50 years ago, a talented craftsman, who his friends would call Little John, did it in his humble shop. We saw the car at a Good Guys event a few years ago, and it's been carefully preserved and still looks great. However, if you didn't know it, you'd think the car was built recently because it's just so timeless. The Accostas' 1960 Buick Invicta X60. Many of today's builds are beyond reproach. With so many talented shops and so many well-heeled clients that have the money to finance these incredible builds, we're seeing cars created today that will blow minds wherever they're shown. Trouble is, most people choose to build the most popular cars like 32 Fords, Tri-5 Chevys, first-gen Camaros, and the Dodge and Plymouth E-bodies, to name a few. Someone that wants to build an unlikely car like a 1960 Buick Invicta hardtop is truly a real pioneer. Well, that's just what George and Angela Accostas did, and with the help of Bennington, Nebraska-based Cal Automotive Creations, they knocked it out of the park. It took shop owner Andy Leach and his team 9 years to complete the car, and even if you've only seen it in photos, it's breathtaking. But if you see it in person, you can spend at least a half hour soaking in every detail, just like I did this past year when I saw the car at 4 different events. I even went back a second and a third time at each show. It's just that well executed. Starting with an attractive GM bubble top design, making any modifications is risky because they can be painfully obvious and look like an afterthought. Not so with this ride. Every modification was well thought out, and even the finishes of each component had to be appropriate, and they certainly are. Using an old school 401 nailhead engine instead of the latest LS type engine, it gives the car an old school vibe and blends perfectly with all the latest technology in this build. The block and all the related components have been smoothed, and it's now supercharged with custom brackets skillfully fabricated for the AC, the power steering, and the alternator. Custom headers are seen, as are custom machine valve covers and air cleaners, under which resides a crank-driven supercharger. The 4L80E overdrive automatic has also been smoothed, and the power is then transferred to a scratch-built independent rear suspension. The front suspension is also hand-fabricated and utilizes bare 4-wheel disc brakes. The body has many subtle mods, and some that are more radical, but they all flow seamlessly together. Remember, just because they're subtle doesn't mean they're easy to do. The fact that they're undetectable speaks volumes about the skills of the craftsmen working at Cal Automotive Creations. Even people that are very familiar with these cars find it nearly impossible to discern everything that's been altered. The side trim and custom ornamentation was all CAD designed in brass before a trip through the plater's tank, along with the hand-built bumpers and other trim, and the color and paint application is absolutely stunning. The best part of all, at least in my opinion, is the stance created in large part by the custom 19-inch wheels that are machined from 9 separate parts, including the built-in white walls. Inside, there are many custom touches to enhance what hasn't been altered. This is seen throughout the build, and everything blends together in perfect harmony. It looks as though it's been restored, perhaps the way it should have been built by Buick in 1960. This is my all-time favorite custom car, and I've seen countless examples over the past half-century. There are many cars that I also think are amazing, but when viewing this Buick, it seems to speak to my soul when examining it in detail. It seems I'm not the only one impressed by this creation. The car won many major awards in 2023 when it was fresh out of Leach's shop. How's this for amazing? Grand National Roadster Show Al Slonaker Award, SEMA Battle of the Builders winner, Good Guys Custom Rod of the Year, the ultimate Best in Show at the 2024 Barrett-Jackson Cup. There were many additional awards the car received at other shows as well. I really hope you get to experience it in person. And take your time, there's a lot to see. Well, that concludes our list of my 12 all-time most influential hot rods ever built. Certainly, there are many more cars that I absolutely love, respect the history of, or I'm a fan of the builder, or any number of reasons. Hit the thumbs up icon and let me know in the comments what car was your favorite on my list and why. I hope you enjoyed this video, so we'll see you next week, and thanks for watching.